Alright, so recently a friend of mine got into Foundry VTT and like many of us, fell in love at first game session, and after a little bit of time of them kind of running some game sessions and getting the hang of things, they reached out to me again and asked me this question. What are some of the simplest ways that I can make my game session feel like a pro's using Foundry? But as a professional game master who uses Foundry for my game sessions, I want to share my answer that I gave to my friend with you guys as well, because while Foundry is a very powerful virtual tabletop and can be very complicated, it doesn't mean that you have to have a coding degree in order to make your game sessions feel like they're being run by a pro. So, hello, my name is Nate and I've been using Foundry VTT for quite a while at this point to run my game sessions, and in this video I want to share with you the 5 ways that I have found are the simplest ways to improve your game session using Foundry without getting needlessly complicated. So to start off, probably the easiest and simplest method of enhancing your game sessions using Foundry, or really any VTT for that matter, is just using more artwork. Foundry has tons of features and settings in place that allow you to show artwork, and yet despite this, I feel like a lot of people either don't know about them or just don't use them all that often. Features like creating scenes to show art, or showing journal entries with art, or even showing NPC art. And this is why I told my friend and why I'm telling you guys that the simplest way you can improve your game sessions is just to show more art or visual aids. So like for example, if you as the game master know that the players are going to be interacting with a crucial NPC pretty frequently throughout your campaign, something like a king or a queen or like a guild leader or something like that, then you should find artwork for that NPC and display it every time the players interact with them. In my experience, this helps the players immensely because it gives them a face to talk to rather than just some artwork of like a cityscape or a forest or whatever, and especially if your group doesn't use webcams, then this really helps players get into the scene, if that makes sense. And I understand that if you run a theater of mind game, then this point may not really apply to you as much as it may for others. But with a virtual tabletop as powerful as Foundry, I think you're really missing out if you don't take full advantage of its ability to show artwork for scenes, NPCs, player characters, and items regularly. In my experience, using artwork or visual aids to help describe a scene or a landscape can be really beneficial to the players to help them immerse themselves in what their characters are currently going through. Because sometimes it can be really difficult to describe an entire landscape in a reasonable amount of time, I guess, and sometimes players can get really lost in all the fancy words that you may be using to describe that landscape. And like I've said in other videos, it's one thing to describe an NPC, scene, or landscape or whatever, but it's another thing entirely to be able to give a visual reference to yourself and the players and then build on that image if need be by adding in your own little details or changes. Plus, if you utilize some mods like Monk's Enhanced Journal for example, you can tie artwork for NPCs and entire NPC sheets to journal entries, which really helps players and game masters identify these NPCs at a glance in their journal entries. But next up, and kind of on the same topic of artwork, I want to talk about utilizing a home screen or landing screen. And you may be kind of confused what I mean by a home screen or a landing screen, but those words are just basically interchangeable, and all they mean is a scene that you can utilize for the beginning and end of your game sessions that helps displays information to the players and perhaps keeps them entertained while they're waiting for your game session to start. By giving your sessions a home screen or a landing screen, it can be a fun way for your players to keep track of information and also provide them with reminders or refreshers as to what happened last game. And the good news is that a lot of pre-made adventures for Foundry nowadays come with landing screens that you can use, but they don't always have some of the things I think home screens should have, like displaying what the party's current objective is and stuff like that. And at this point you may be worried because you feel like you're not very creative or artistic and don't know how to make a home screen or stuff like that, but don't worry because the internet is chock full of pre-made landing screens that you can choose from or be inspired by. Or if you don't find any you like, then you can just go back to Foundry, create a scene with a fantasy landscape background, and then use a scroll or piece of parchment PNG that you can find online, and then use Foundry's tiles, draw, and text tools to create your very own landing screen. And now you can add information to your home screen like what player has gone down the most times, who has the highest roll, what is the party's current objective, or how many familiars has the party lost so far, or stuff like that. And there are even more ways that you can enhance your home screen and make it truly interactive, but that kind of ties into another point that I have later in the video, so stick around to find out what it is. But moving on to this next point, use your playlist and especially your ambient sound tool on battle maps to help create immersion during your game sessions. And I know sometimes using the ambient sound tool can take a little bit of extra time to do during your game prep, but trust me, it's worth it. For a lot of people I've talked to, especially beginners when it comes to using Foundry, they see the ambient sound tool and just don't bother using it all that much because they think it's a lot easier to just use the sound tool. But if you can take the extra 5 minutes or so to set up ambient sounds for your battle maps, It adds so much in the way of immersion and takes some of the load off your shoulders as the game master when you're running a session. One of my favorite and simple ways to use this tool, which is kind of how it's meant to be used, is when I know that the players are going to be transitioning between two different atmospheres. Like maybe they're going to be transitioning from a forest to a cave, or if they enter a room that has a very obvious sound kind of permeating throughout it, it may be quiet in the rest of the castle that they're adventuring in, but as soon as they enter into this room, it's very loud and noisy. And they not only know this because I can describe it to them, but they can also hear it in their little ear holes. I distinctly remember the very first time I actually took the extra time to set up these ambient sounds because my players were wowed at how seamless the transition was when they were moving their tokens between a cave and a forest setting. And it truly does add so much in the way of immersion when you're using a battle map. Like in this example made by Forgotten Adventures, where if you continue walking towards and into the cave, the sounds of the forest slowly begin to fade away and are replaced by the ambience of a cold, dark cave. And the best part is that you didn't have to play a single track. It all just happens automatically for each individual token. This not only helps with the storytelling and immersion aspects of your game sessions because the players can actively hear the sounds of the scene that they're in, but also helps you as the game master because you don't have to describe what the players are hearing because they can hear it for themselves, which also helps you focus on other details like what the players are smelling, seeing, or feeling. And if after all of these examples I just gave you still don't want to use the ambient sound tool, then hey, cool, no worries, I get it, but I still think you should set up some ambient sounds for some common areas that the players might visit, like a forest or a tavern or a cityscape or things like that. That way you can easily play them when the players arrive to those locations to add that extra layer of immersion for your game sessions. And at this point you may be thinking, okay, yeah, Nate, whatever. I'm supposed to download tons of ambiences to create immersion for my game sessions. This simple point you just give us isn't actually that simple because finding good music like that is impossible. What, am I just supposed to go to YouTube and download the 3-hour video of ambiences for a forest and then upload that to Foundry? That's ridiculous. And I agree, and you don't have to do that because Michael Gelfi, who you may know about because he's a very talented and fantastic creator in the TTRPG community, has a free mod for Foundry that if you download adds tons of amazing ambiences and soundtracks to your game for dungeons, taverns, cityscapes, and so much more. And if you like what you see there, you can go support him on Patreon to literally get access to thousands more of soundtracks and ambiences. Oh, and also another pro tip, you can configure the settings of a scene to automatically play a soundtrack when you activate it, which is a handy little trick that you can do to prep for your game sessions. But these next couple of tips are a little different from the ones previous because they actually require mods. But don't worry, they're not complicated at all, which is really surprising considering that this next tip I'm about to share with you literally adds animations to the game, and all you had to do was just download mods. You don't have to change the settings or anything. And if you happen to play some little known game systems called Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinders, I think what they're called, then you're in luck because there are some additional mods that you can download that add even more animations to your game. So to start off, you're going to need these mods and their dependencies: automated animations, sequencer, JB2A animated assets, either the Patreon version or the free version, sound effects library, and if you play D&D or Pathfinder, then you're probably going to want to download one of these two mods. Then you enable these mods like normal, you go into your game world, go to manage modules, enable these mods, and boom! You now have an entire library of pre-made animations for everything from spells to weapon attacks to status effects, and all you had to do was download a couple of mods. But if you don't play Pathfinder or D&D, then don't worry, because with these mods, you can either make your own animations by going into the configure settings directory, finding automated animations and adding one that way, or by clicking the edit button next to a spell or item and clicking the AA symbol here and customizing it that way. For this video at least, I won't be going into a full breakdown of automated animations or any of the other mods I've covered so far, but let me know if that'd be something you guys would be interested in seeing. Oh, and also automated animations comes with a few pre-made animations for fantasy games already built in, so you have a couple of good examples to work off of in case you want to create your own custom animation for something. But finally, the last way that you could improve your virtual game sessions using Foundry VTT is to use Monk's Active Tile mod. This mod is used with a lot of pre-made maps and modules for Foundry, so you may have seen or heard of it before, and if you're anything like me, you had it downloaded but avoided using it directly because of how complicated it looked. But just like any of the best complicated mods out there, this mod can be used to great effect for little simple details like transitioning between a scene automatically, or automatically pausing the game when a player walks onto a trap, and so much more. But here's how I learned to utilize this mod in some simple ways. First, for my home screens, I like to add in little details that I call jingling keys to keep my players entertained while they wait for my sessions to start. So over here, I added a tile that if double clicked by one of my players, it plays a little whoosh sound effect and takes them to the region map. And if they want to go back, they can either use the scene directory or just double click this back button. And if you want to copy my work for this idea, then here's how I set it up. First, I make a transparent tile over the map area that I want to be clickable. Then go to the triggers settings of the tile settings. I then double check that anyone can click this tile at any time, and a pointer will appear indicating to the players that this tile can be interacted with. I then go to the setup section and add in a play sound and change scene action. And for these, basically you just choose a sound that you want to play and you choose the scene that you want it to change to. Also, be sure to have it set to where the sound and scene change only happen for the triggering player. Otherwise, that can be a bit confusing when the scene randomly changes for everyone else. And then regarding the back button on the map scene, I just set it up the exact same way as the previous tile, except I changed the scene change action to change to the active scene rather than a specific one. And as you may have guessed by now, the tiles for the snacks, drinks, and bathroom are just tiles with a play sound action tied to them for the triggering player. But this is just for your home screen. You can also use this mod to enhance your battle maps, and one of the easiest and simplest ways to do that is by setting up automatic pause tiles. This is to help manage your players, because sometimes when you have like 2 to 6 or more players all in a Foundry session and all on the same battle map, it can be really difficult to keep track of who's doing what and who's going where. Like for example, you may have one part of the party over here trying to get the store owner to confess to their crime of pixie dust smuggling, while over here you may have the rogue trying to sneak in through the back door when, oops, he triggered a trap and the game is automatically paused. And you may be confused why you would even want to do this, because obviously you could just press spacebar to pause the game, but what this does for you as the game master is frees up your attention, because now you can focus on role-playing the NPC or answering other players' questions or regarding the scene or what they're doing or things like that, and you don't have to keep track of each individual person's movement on the battle map. You can just keep the game unpaused, let them interact with the world how they want to, and if one of them triggers something or walks into a doorway or does something they probably shouldn't have, it will automatically pause the game for you if they walk over the tile. So to set this up, all you have to do is create a transparent tile, set the trigger to be when a token enters the tile, and then move on to the actions section where you can add these actions. Then boom, your tile is all set up to stop those pesky little loot goblins in their tracks the next time they run too far ahead of the party or enter a room that they probably shouldn't have if they didn't check for traps. But wait, there's more, because another way I really like to use this mod is to place little tiles around the map at points of interest that, if interacted with, will show scrolling text with a short description of whatever the player is trying to interact with, kind of like a thought bubble. Or if there's a description of something like a statue or a wall that holds key details to a puzzle that's in the room or something like that, I like to use the show dialogue action. That way my players can keep the window open for easy reference if need be. And if you're curious how I do this, here's how. For the scrolling text, all I do is create a transparent tile that's appropriately sized for whatever I want to show a short description of, then make sure that it's triggered by clicking on it. It really comes down to preference when choosing how you want your players to be able to interact with the tile, but for me, I like to use the double click option so that way they don't accidentally click on it when they're just trying to do other stuff on the battle map. And then from there, I make sure that the hover over pointer and must have sight boxes are checked, and then move on to actions where I use the scrolling text action and then set it up like this. And for a quick explanation of what these fields do, in case you want to know, you want to put the text that you want to show to your players here, and I'd recommend keeping it short so that way it doesn't take up the entire screen. Then the select entity section is where you want the text to appear. So in this case, I want the text to appear over the player character that triggers the tile, kind of like a thought bubble. So I have it set to triggering token. Then right here, you probably want to have it set to only occur for the triggering player, that way other players aren't confused when they're seeing other players' thoughts, and then set how long you want the text to be shown for and the direction that the text fades into. And then for the text box pop-up, it's the same setup as before, except you want to choose the show dialogue action, change the dialogue type to alert, add in the title, content, and of course, click update. Like I said, super simple, doesn't take very much time to set up, and can really help your players when navigating a scene or going through a puzzle room or when exploring a dungeon. But these methods that I just shared with you are truly the most simplistic ways to use this mod and are truly the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Monk's active tiles, because this mod can do so much more. So if you want me to make a how-to video on some of the more intricate stuff that this mod lets you do, then let me know. But anyways, everybody, those are my 5 simple ways to improve your virtual game sessions using Foundry VTT, and I hope this video helped you out or perhaps gave you some cool ideas. And above all else, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, consider leaving a like and a comment down below, because it really helps me out, and I always love reading your guys' comments. But anyways, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.